Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, I will be walking you through one of the key concepts to achieving competency and assurance, which is how to write an effective audit planning memo. If you have selected assurance as an elective in your CPA Canada PEP, or it is your role for the CFE, writing an effective audit planning memo will be the key to achieving multiple competency grades. Let's walk through the 4 steps of writing an effective audit planning memo. That is risk, approach, materiality, and procedures. This is often abbreviated as RAMP to better help you remember during an exam. Note that for Core 1, performance materiality will not be necessary to receive a C. Let's start with reviewing how to assess risk. Your first step in writing an audit planning memo will be to assess the overall financial statement level risk, also known as OFSL. This represents the risk of an audit engagement and the risk of material misstatements, also known as RMM. This assessment will be the foundation of determining what approach should be used to gather the appropriate evidence, the level of materiality we should accept, and the procedures required to form an audit opinion. It's important to analyze case facts for factors that either increase or decrease the level of risk. A well-rounded risk response will contribute to some form of a balanced response between the two. In my experience for Day 2 cases of the CFE, you will often need to discuss appropriately 5 factors, usually increasing, and at least 1 factor of decreasing risk. As you read the case initially, make sure to mark factors you can refer back to for this assessment opportunity. When writing your response, using bullets is a great strategy to use time effectively. Each bullet should discuss what the risk is, why the impact increases or reduces overall risk. Students who don't achieve competent are often the result of not having the sufficient amount of risks or lacking the depth in the risk impact. Be sure to only discuss new risk factors for the current year when assessing risk as well. Be sure to conclude if the risk overall is high, moderate, or low, and why. Example, it may be high because factors increasing risk outweigh the factors that decrease the risk. The vast majority of time, you'll conclude that the risk is often high due to the nature of CPA exams. And a key reason why we see people not achieve competency on an exam is because they forget this step of concluding. Some common risk factors include the bank relying on covenants, which will increase the management bias risk to meet these covenants. Another example is several financial statement errors, which increases the risk that there are additional errors not yet identified. Another example is that company ABC has been audited before, and this will actually decrease the risk as the auditor is familiar with the businesses and the processes. The last example we have is that an implemented new software has taken place within the year, and this will increase the risk as the auditor is often unfamiliar with the controls and the new software could result in errors to the financial statements. Let's now look at an example. Here is an effective way to write the risks and conclude. As you can see, to make it easier for the reader, they have outlined which factors are increasing and decreasing to risk. This example uses case-specific facts such as rapid expansion, new client for the audit firm, and no audit committee. The impact is also stated, describing how specifically the risk is affected. Then you can see at the very end the writer concludes on the risk being high and the reasoning as to why. Now let's discuss step 2, which is identifying the audit approach. To determine the overall approach for gathering audit evidence, you must assess the control risk on an overall basis. If the controls can be relied on, typically a combined approach will be used. If controls are determined to be weak, a substantive approach is concluded. You may also consider how different areas of the business or certain processes may require different approaches. For example, if there is a client we have audited before and typically use a combined approach, but there is now a new purchasing system, we may choose to maintain a combined approach but use a more substantive approach surrounding that new purchasing process. Also note that if this is a continuing engagement, our focus should be on factors of the control environment that has changed. To conclude on this, identify case facts related to the overall control environment, the nature of the business, and explain the impact of these on the audit. Some common considerations may include new system and processes, or the company having multiple locations, which may make it difficult for the auditor to visit and apply a substantive approach. Now let's look at an example of an effective way to write an approach. See how the writer has separated the positive control risk factors and why, as well as the negative risk factors. They have also included a conclusion supporting whether the controls can be relied on and why, as well as the recommended audit approach. Now let's discuss how to determine materiality. Materiality is a product of user needs, not the audit risk. Therefore, you must identify the key users of the financial statements and what their needs are. For example, potential investors may be concerned with the overall profitability, but the bank could be more interested in debt and equity based on covenants. In my experience, it is usually a good idea to discuss between 2 to 3 users, and understanding these user needs will provide support for your chosen materiality base. It's also important to calculate materiality where possible on revised financial statements, that is, after the financial reporting corrections you make. Performance materiality is based on the auditor's professional judgment and is associated with the risk of the engagement. This serves to mitigate errors that may not be detected during the testing phase. Looking at a sample solution of a materiality response, we see that the writer has included 2 different users and specifically what their needs are. They discuss how this contributes to the chosen base and why a specific threshold should be chosen. They have also calculated the overall materiality, while lastly discussing performance materiality. As the last step, let's review how to prepare audit procedures. Procedures should be written for high-risk transactions, accounts, or assertions. When writing audit planning memos in CPA cases, it's often written for all financial reporting issues. You should identify the specific risk, the related assertion, and then the procedure. For example, procedures are often abbreviated to RAP, meaning the risk, assertion, and procedure. Here's an example of a risk. Company ABC has pressure to meet a debt-to-equity covenant from the bank. There is a risk that due to this management bias, the accounts payable account for which is owed is not complete. Therefore, the assertion is then completeness. Students should read the requirements carefully. Sometimes an AO will not require procedures, sometimes only the RAM acronym will be applicable. We do have a separate video on assertions, and we'll have that linked in the corner of this video for you to learn more about that. Audit procedures should be specific and detailed by demonstrating a step-by-step process. To be specific, you can use case facts such as referencing specific documents, accounts, or procedures outlined for this company. The procedure should address how the risk can be looked into and how the evidence will be acquired. You should also make sure this procedure is practical and realistic and avoid any general statements that you could use for any case in particular. It also helps to write the procedures below the FR issues as opposed to combining them at the end. This is because they are closely related to the FR issues you are discussing, and you can reference the FR issue as you write your procedures themselves. Some common procedures include some of the following, such as obtaining a copy of all materials related to R&D and reviewing them in accordance to the above criteria to determine if costs should be capitalized. This is an example of how it relates directly to the FR issue above it. Another example includes vouching a sample of the contract to the supporting contracts and any revisions made to these supporting contracts. Check for the date, the contract amount, and any unusual terms. For example, here's an FR issue with the audit procedures below it. You will see that even though the procedure is right after the financial reporting issue, the risk is still addressed separately. You can also have more than one related assertion to a particular issue. The procedure here is specific in what needs to be obtained, what is done with the evidence, and how the risk is overall assessed. Applying this structure for an audit planning memo will ensure your assessment is complete and in depth to achieve competency. Students should practice the why and how of the impact for each step of the audit planning memo in accordance with case facts, and then you will be ready to practice preparing CPA audit planning memos. Thank you.